Hey guys, it's Susie. Welcome back to my channel. I am still working on getting through my hoard. I figure it's going to take me the whole month of January. In this video, I'm going to do some small furniture makeovers. For the first makeover, I found this bench at a yard sale for $5 probably 8 or 9 months ago. It's got good bones except for the seat is in pretty good shape, but that is no problem. I'm going to start out by giving this 2 coats of DIY aviary. And when I first started putting it on, I'm like, oh, wow, this looks awful John Deere green up against this yellow. Made me a little scared at first, but once I started putting the second coat on, I could really see a difference. I love to pick up these smaller furniture items like this because this is where I make most of my money, in the $40 to $90 range. So I'm always picking up cheap nightstands, benches, stuff like that I can flip. So I got the second coat of paint on here, and while I was doing that, Heath cut me out a new seat bench, and we are going to get started covering that next. So I've got a nice piece of plywood and a brand new drop cloth that we're going to use. I'm just going to measure out the drop cloth, cut it out to fit, leaving plenty of excess to make up for the padding and such. I didn't wash this drop cloth first, so I'm just going to iron out a few wrinkles before our next step, which is to paint some grain sack stripes on. Y'all know I'm not one for measuring. I am more of an eye it kind of gal. So that's just what I'm going to do here. I'm going to put 3 strips of painter's tape up against each other. And then I'm going to do another strip out, I don't know, maybe about a 1/2 inch out. And I'm going to remove the one in the middle for the big stripe. And then I will have a large stripe and 2 small stripes on each side. I'm going to be using the same aviary paint that I used on the bench and a foam brush and just pressing it into the fabric. And luckily this does not bleed through with the painter's tape on fabric, so the lines come out perfectly clean if you take the tape off while the paint is still wet. So I let the paint dry, and then I did heat set it. I didn't get that recorded, but I will show you guys later in the next project. And then we're going to take the foam board, which this is new, but for some reason it's white in the package. And then when you take it out of the package, it slowly turns yellow like this. So I'm just going to spray adhesive it onto the plywood just to keep it from moving around on me. And then we're going to upholster the drop cloth fabric onto it. I'm measuring out a little bit just to make sure that I get my grain sack stripe in the middle of the seat. And then the way I upholster is I just put a few on all the ends and then do the corners last. You don't have to get real fancy with the corners as long as they are folded under. You're going to cut most of the excess off anyway. So that's just what I do. I get it all stapled in, and then I'm going to cut the excess off, screw it back on the bench, and I did seal the bench and then decided to distress it and use a little dark wax on it. And what do you guys think about the way this little farmhouse bench turned out? know I said I wasn't going to go shopping again, but my neighbors had an estate sale and I couldn't help but pick up these two little footstools. I don't think y'all have even seen the thrift haul where I got these, but I wanted to get them done and in my booth because I know they're going to sell really good. So I am just taking them apart and keeping all the screws and all the hinges and taking off the tops. And first thing you got to do with any flip is get your item all cleaned up. I'm using Crud Cutter and cleaning everything up nice and good. And then I'm going to give these little footstools front, back, bottom, inside, head to toe, a coat of this Midnight Sky by Dixie Belle. Almost could have got away with one coat. I think I ended up doing about a coat and a half, just touching up some areas that needed just a little bit more. After the paint dried, I came back with a damp rag and just wet distressed them, brought back some of that cherry wood underneath, and then I'm going to let that dry and seal them with some clear wax before we move on to the tops. So the tops that were on these were not in great shape, and they were just a little bit too big and hung over one side too much. So I had Heath cut me down a couple more pieces of wood, and now I am painting one side of the piece of wood drop cloth, because these benches, when you open them up, you will see the underneath. For the top, we're going to use drop cloth again to upholster, and just to give it a little bit something more, I wanted to put a stamp on it, and I decided on the Queen Bee stamps. You can never go wrong with those if you ask me, so I've just got a couple of laurels to put on the side, a big bee, and decided to use the small crown. And I'm not measuring where these are. We'll center that up on the seats or on the footstools later, using a thin mount and picking up all of the stamps at one time where I want them. And I'm going to use black ink and ink up these stamps. These have been used many times already, so I did not need to sand them. But if you're using your stamps for the first time, you do want to roughen them up a little bit with some 220 grit sandpaper. And then once you stamp, you want to hold it in the same spot and use your fingers to go over all of the images. That way the entire stamp gets on your fabric. Now, drop cloth does do pretty light, but that was the way I wanted it to look anyway. And pro tip, always clean your stamps while they're still on the thin mount. It just makes it so much easier, and put them right back where they go so you don't lose any of them. And here's how I heat set them. This is just a little piece of heat fabric that comes with your heat transfer vinyl. And so the ink is dry and it is permanent, but I'm just going to set it really well. And then for the batting or the padding on these footstools, this is just like an old quilted pillow sham. And I didn't need anything really fluffy, and I honestly did not have any more foam, so that worked out really well to just use that quilted pillow sham for underneath. So same thing here with the upholstery. I'm going to slow down here so you can kind of see on the corners, how you just bring the fabric in and then cut the excess fabric off. Like I mentioned before, on these little footstools, they open up and have storage compartments. So I wanted to actually, make the inside look somewhat nice too. So once I got all the upholstery done, I decided to hot glue some ribbon over the staples just to clean it up a little bit. And I had the perfect ribbon, only I didn't realize I did not have enough until I started. So I didn't have enough to do both of them. So what I decided to do is just the short sides, use this ribbon, and then I have another ribbon that I will add in for the long sides. But we got the backs of these cleaned up, and then the hardest part about these little footstools was getting the hinges back because, this is a new board. The holes aren't there. I had to get everything lined up, and it was just an ordeal. It took longer than the rest of it, but we did finally get it, and I think these guys turned out so cute. For the last makeover in today's video, I found this nightstand at a thrift store. I paid $20 for it. The shape of it is amazing. The bones are in great shape. The drawers work perfectly. It's immaculate inside of it. The only issue was there was quite a few little dings and stuff on the top, but that was absolutely no problem. We're going to paint it anyway, so I just sanded the top down the best that I could get it and then cleaned the whole thing up. I'm going to be using a light color on this, and just to get ahead of any bleed through that may happen, I'm going to go ahead and give it a couple of coats of shellac. This is good quality paint that I'm using, so it's likely it would not have bled through anyway, but I'm just going to get ahead of it just in case. Once the shellac dried, I brought it back into paint. This is the first chalk mineral paint that I ever used, and I've loved it ever since. This is the color Alabaster, and I'm just going to give it 2 coats. we're going to give inlays a chance again. If you haven't used the IOD inlays, they are a process, that's for sure, but the projects always turn out so unique when you use them. So what you're doing is laying down a good coat of paint, and then you are going to put your inlay with the grid side up and press it down so it makes contact all over. And I work in small sections, which these drawers are small anyway, but I did have to cut to line up the pattern. I did have to cut off 2 different pages to get these drawers all done in the least amount of pages. Once you have your inlay laid down and contacting with the wet paint, you want to take a spray bottle or a wet sponge or something and just wet your inlay paper to activate the paint, and then you just want to let it dry. If you're wondering, this is the Rose Chintz inlay. I haven't had a chance to use it before, but I think it is so beautiful, and I think that this little nightstand is the perfect piece to use it on. After your inlays have had time to dry, then comes the fun part, and I'm always slightly disappointed in the results when I first start taking these off. Sometimes some parts just don't transfer. I know everyone says that that's the beauty of it, this distressed vintage look, and I'm learning, and I do love how the end products turn out, but I do wish that they were a little bit more consistent. I do the same thing every single time, and I never get the same results. So to remove your inlays, you want to re-wet them. You want to let them sit just a minute to have time to kind of release. And then you want to slowly pull your paper back, and your image will be transferred on to your piece. Also, when you remove your inlay papers, lay them flat to dry, because as long as there's still paint on them, you can reuse them. see what I'm saying? Like, you'll have perfectly good transfers, and then on the very same sheet, you'll have spotty transfer. But I think what I'm doing wrong, and I've been doing this a lot, and I try really hard, I think I'm not getting enough paint in some areas for the inlay to grab to. But nonetheless, I'm obsessed with how this nightstand turned out. I think it's beautiful, and I know that it's going to sell really fast. So I hope that you guys have enjoyed today's video. I want to let you know how much I appreciate you watching my channel and my flips. I'm actually getting close to getting through my hoard. My plan is to get it done in January so I can really get serious shopping and making money in my booth. Y'all have a great night, and I will see you next week.